Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Douglas A. Burton, and tonight I have three wonderful guests joining me, and we're going to go through we're going through the comprehensive history of Lucasfilm during the Kennedy era, which is 2012 to 2025. We're going to go through the context of it all and kind of really relook at everything. We're going to critique it. We're going to review it. We're going to recontextualize it in the sense that we believe this era is done, and also for the historical value of it, what it meant then and what it might mean now. So joining me, first and foremost, Heath Robinson. You want to tell everyone who you are and where they could find you?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Heath Robinson. My main channel is Heath's Geekverse, where we cover tabletop games, especially role-playing games. I do the Morning Grind live stream there. But then also, you may know us from Table Talk, which is a separate channel where we talk about stories and storytelling, and Doug is a frequent guest there, as well as Retro Nerd Girl. So if you're interested in that kind of material, well, then Table Talks.
That's right. And also we have joining us Retro Nerd Girl. She specializes in going through and kind of preserving, almost museum-like, retrospectives of some of the older movies up to, what would you say, the 80s, maybe 90s, more 80s?
Actually, I'm expanding, and so we're starting from silent films, and we're going towards maybe the films that have been in the last 10 years. So I give it a good 10 years.
Well, and she's got great perspective on films, a ton of film lore in her mind, and she's also a huge Star Wars fan and has strong opinions, like many of us do, about Star Wars, the good and the bad, during the Kennedy era. And so, Retro, do you want to tell everyone where they could find you?
Yes, you can find me at Retro Nerd Girl on YouTube and also on X.
All right. And then last but not least, we have Lance from the Outcast Creative. Lance has worked in the industry as an insider in the UK for many decades. And so he's going to be able to bring some perspective about the practical reality of filmmaking, maybe do some myth busting on what is unusual versus what is not that unusual in film. And also some perspective on how it works in the background and where some of the things that happened during Lucasfilm were okay and where they strayed into the absurd. So, Lance, you want to tell everyone where they could find you?
Yeah, several decades. That makes me sound so old. Yeah, so hi, I just want to say first and foremost, I am an original first generation Star Wars fan who saw Star Wars in the summer of '77 in the UK, like everybody else saw it in the UK. You can find me on the Outcast Creative channel. The purpose of our channel primarily is to support other creative people. So if you have a project, like you have a game on Kickstarter, or maybe you've got a book coming out on Amazon, you might be making a movie. If you're a creative in any of the creative genres, music, whatever it might be, we're always interested in getting you on, interviewing you and supporting you. We interview people across all the creative arts, including people that have been in the trenches, like myself, for many decades. I've had Gail Ann Hurd on, I've had actor Damon Herriman recently, director Ron Underwood, who did Tremors, and I just hit my 104th interview this Monday. So, yeah,
Oh, wow.
So hoping to hit, well, I don't know if we'll hit 200 by the end of the year, but we're certainly going to hit 150. So, yeah, do come along. We do movie reviews and things like that. We have 2 weekly shows where we tend to mainly recommend stuff. A bit like Retro, we like to recommend things that we think are good. So we do like a weekly one every Tuesday at 10 o'clock UK time. That's usually the new releases. And then on Sunday at 8 o'clock, we do Chew the Fat, where we do an in-depth review on stuff like Band of Brothers, The Shield. We did Crimson Tide and The Hunt for Red October last week. And there'll always be a theme. So, yeah, lots of interesting content, I hope. And long may that continue. You know. And thanks very much for inviting me on. I've got lots of thoughts on this subject.
Well, we're very interested in hearing them. We have a lot to cover. So last week we released part 1 of the history of Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy. and that spanned the years of 2012 to 2015. We covered in depth the situation of Lucasfilm in 2012, the handoff to Disney, what it meant, the few things that came out early then, and also I think we left off with the trailer, which was a big deal when it first dropped. Everyone.
Yes.
So now we are on the doorstep. We're in 2015, and we're on the doorstep of the sequel trilogy actually coming out. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through it and kind of remember how this was experienced at the time, and then also add some perspective looking back. What does this mean now that we know? But also it's important to recreate how we thought of it then, because it's different than how we think of it. For some of us knew right away they didn't like it. So one thing, but I wanted to do is I like to go over just a few numbers to get started. And I did a little something interesting that I'd like to share with everybody. What I did was I took a look at the budget, what it takes to put this a movie together, just for comparison's sake. Okay. And yes, I will adjust for inflation so we can get something more direct in a comparison. But in 1977, when George Lucas put together A New Hope, he spent $11 million to create that film. $11 million. And then 3 years later, in 1980, when he made The Empire Strikes Back, he went way over budget. I think it was budgeted for around 11 million, and he ended up spending $30.5 million to make Empire Strikes Back in 1980.
What happens when you shoot in Norway in the snow?
Yeah, it was cold up there. Yeah. 3 years later, 1983, episode 6 comes out, Return of the Jedi, for a similar budget, $32.5 million to put that all together. And so when you look at the whole trilogy, the original trilogy, it cost $74 million to create 6 hours roughly of the original trilogy, which pretty much changed the world and popular culture as we knew it. So what I did is I'm going to take a look at the next 2 trilogies that came out, the prequels.
Do you have that figure adjusted for inflation, what that would be today?
So here's what I did, and I'll show the math right at the end. Okay. I looked at it in terms of the first film in each trilogy, what it cost, and so I adjusted it. So for example, 1999 is the first film of the prequels. I adjusted $1977 to $1999. Force Awakens, the first film of sequel number 3, 1977 adjusted to 2015. So we're going to get a real solid look with adjusted number, what it cost, the comparison in terms of cost alone to produce the trilogy, each trilogy. So the original trilogy, as you see there, $74 million. So skip ahead. The prequel trilogy from 1999, 2002, and 2005 cost $343 million to put together. So big jump. Wow. Now to look at inflation. Right? Yeah. Prequel trilogy cost $343 million. And if you adjust the budget for inflation for the original trilogy, based on the timing of the movie, it would adjust out to $160.5 million, roughly twice as much to produce the prequel trilogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Now, let's take a look at what they spent to make the sequel trilogy. $1.25 billion to produce the sequel trilogy. It's an absurd number, really, when you think about it. And even if you adjust for inflation, the original trilogy comes out to $217 million in adjusted dollars, as they would say in Aliens. So almost 6 times the amount to produce the sequel trilogy. And I would argue that whereas the original trilogy had vast cultural relevance, the sequel trilogy almost has the opposite effect at this point.
Yes.
Vast cultural irrelevance. So
no one talks about the sequel trilogy impacting their life, or my friends' kids never talk about it. I mean, that's an interesting difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, right. It's the same way. I mentioned this before, that a weird thing about the nephews when my brother was talking about them is that they have basically never watched anything twice because of the quantity of media they have at their fingertips with the streaming service and whatever else. I mean, I had the VHS tapes in the drawer, so those got watched over and over again. But if you live in a world today where you don't watch anything again, it's not like, oh, the original series or the original trilogy just doesn't hook them, but the new one does, you know, and so they want to watch the new Star Wars movies over and over again. They don't, you know, none of that sits with them the way that it sat with me.
Yeah,
right.
And a lot of people,
and there are structural, archetypal things going on in the original trilogy which make it timeless. And there are, like Lord of the Rings, like there are reasons why some stories go to live on in history and others fail. And I have spent an exorbitant amount of time when I study film looking for those archetypal, primal, timeless qualities under the hood. You know, I remember George Lucas talking in a interview one time, and he's like, Star Wars is not lightsabers and space battles. He goes, because if that were true, then how many other movies have, you know, space battles and lasers and everything in them, and they're not Star Wars. So it's what's underneath, what all that action, what all that imagery means. What it means under the hood is what makes something last. And the sequel trilogy just borrowed the aesthetic, and they created something that had nothing under the hood. And that's why I am so unforgiving of it. Because when I look under the hood at the things that I value the most, I just don't see a lot there. Now, they did start better than they finished. But ultimately, the story, the trilogy is unwatchable because it's not even really a story. And then real quick, here's how I did my math. You look at each trilogy, how it's produced. So what I did is I adjusted the 11 million from 1977 to 1999 to get the 30 million. And then the 11 million from 1977 to 2015 to get the 43 and so on. So you could see the actual straight costs and then the adjusted costs. So, you know, if you look at the adjusted cost of the entire original trilogy at 217 million, LucasFilm in the sequel trilogy the lowest they spent was 300 million on one movie. So pretty outrageous images there, you know.
They seem to be way more efficient.
You would think they would be getting better at the craft, you know, and more efficient.
They were more efficient when they had less money.
And I have a belief, and Lance, I'd love to hear your thought on this, that sometimes when you have budget constraints, it almost forces you to be resourceful.
Look, you only need to look at, and I know this is one of Retro's favourite films as well. You only need to look at the film directed by my great late friend and one of my mentors, Albert Poon, who was a big B-movie director. He did a lot of films for Canon. Albert went through something I've been through many times myself. He said to me he didn't have a single movie that he directed where he was given the budget that he was promised. And the typical thing would be the budget's going to be 3 million, Albert, and he would get to set on day one and be told his budget was 1.5 million, sometimes even 750,000. So you're talking having to make massive cuts. Now, just putting that in perspective for a minute, and I'll check the budget in a second, but if you look at the film The Sword and the Sorcerer, which is Albert's best film, it's his first major feature, it's still his best movie. There's a great 4K release of it that's just come out with a lot of extra bells and whistles. If you look at that movie is a brilliant example of, apart from it's got fantastic scripts and incredible actors that all just go for it tonally in completely the right way. It's a great example of how to do more with less, or in some cases, nothing at all. They didn't have any real castles. They didn't have the massive armies, but you still felt like there had been these huge battles. You still felt you were very much in a Game of Thrones type world, and there were big armies fighting over the horizon, and wounded people were coming running up and saying, you know, the army's been destroyed and this kind of thing. Albert used a number of really clever tricks and he knew how to make the money that he'd got go really far. And I had him on calls like this, private calls like this, pestering him. How did you do that? How did you do this? Tell me what the budget was for this shot and things like that. He was so great with his time for me. And so when you're up against it, when your back's against the wall, 2000% correct, it forces you to be creative, or you find a way to do the things you want to do, but cheaper. And a case in point in my own example, and I remember showing Retro a clip of this. I had to do this tank battle with these two tanks, very similar to like a scene from Saving Private Ryan, and we found out the tanks we wanted were about to be sold to an American collector. So we managed to bag them both for the day, plus all the Germans that came with them, which was about 20 Germans, all correct uniform and everything, and all the weapons fired and all of that kind of stuff. For I think it was £3,000 for the two tanks, plus all those Germans. We spent about $7,000 on that day in total, including paying a crew of 22 and another 50 British paratrooper extras. That's like $7,000 to film a battle scene is nothing. In Hollywood, that's probably the fee of the stunt coordinator for the day. So,
Sure.
we were able to. This is what independent filmmakers do. They look at what's on the script. They look at their contacts. They ring those people up. They negotiate good deals. And shooting period stuff is really difficult. And we found a village that was kind of virtually untouched since World War II. So we secured that as the location, things like that. And Albert managed to find these locations in California and Northern California. There was a big house with lots of grounds, and that kind of doubled for Cromwell's castle at night, because at night you couldn't really tell that it wasn't a castle because it had all these great steps and walkways, and it's got a really great massive interior courtyard where the big battle scene takes place at the end. So that's being creative, whereas the total, when you've got money to burn, I think that the problem is that the people on the team, on the production, go completely the opposite way. They throw money at the problem instead of thinking of creating ways to do it. I'll tell you, a huge portion of the increase of the budget on all those films is because of the increase in digital technology.
Yes.
You only have to look at the credits to see how many people are there doing all those shots in those practically slave labor warehouses full of computers rendering one shot or another.
Layer after layer.
They're all being paid something. And I mean, look at a Marvel film. There's probably over 1,000 of them on any given movie credits, because it just goes on, 5 columns of tiny names scrolling up. That's changed a massive amount of the costs for Star Wars, as opposed to a practical effects team of 12 people filming models against a green or blue screen, and doing the stop motion stuff and all that. That's a much smaller team, but it takes them a lot longer. Of course, technology has changed. I'm not saying we shouldn't use digital technology, but digital technology actually increased the cost of the movies because of the numbers of people that work in that department.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, and a lot changed, from 1977 to 2015 when they were about to tackle the sequel trilogy. And, at the time, and we discussed a little bit of this last week, but at the time, there was, we all remember the original trilogy. And like you said, Lance, the practical effects, the thrill of seeing such fast motion and convincing motion for the spaceships. And then, you had the prequels, which were very heavily dependent on CGI. One of the big criticisms is that it was too much CGI, and it got to the point where the actors were disoriented. They weren't even really mentally in the spaces that were being created for them digitally. So by the time you get to 2015, there was in general some bad taste left in people's mouths about the prequel trilogy and the overuse of CGI and the bad dialogue and the difficulties with acting with so much CGI, that there was some real hope in the fandom that they would return to better form by the time they started filming the sequel trilogy. And so it was actually sold to the public leading up to the release that, hey, we're going to do this right this time. And there was a few leaked photos that showed that they were really building out X-Wings, and it's very tangible this time. And so there was definitely a sense that we're going to shake the monkey off our back from the prequel trilogy and get back into making, Star Wars movies the way Star Wars movies are supposed to be made. That was the thinking at the time.
Well, they definitely built a lot of physical sets. I mean, I remember when their sets were taking up half of Pinewood or Shepperton, I forget which one it was now, and pretty much no other productions could get in there because they were occupying almost every soundstage for one set or another, certainly for the first two films. So they did. I think the one thing this trilogy had going for it might be the only thing is, they did go and film on some interesting locations. They did build some big physical sets. I think that was pretty evident when you watch the movie. Yeah. You can see the actual. The balance is better than in the prequels. Yeah. That's what I'm
balance. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Brought balance to the Force. I funny it did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was the movie poster. I remember it was kind of a big deal. I think by The Last Jedi, they moved away from Drew Struzan designing the posters because he had designed most of the Star Wars posters and a lot of the movies in the 80s. Drew Struzan was like the guy. Let me see. Did he actually do this one?
The original Star Wars poster, I think, was done by the same guy who did the Land That Time Forgot poster, which I had to get copyright to include in my book. I think it's Chris Cantrell, his name was, who did the original first Star Wars poster.
Okay, so it looks like Drew Struzan did. So he did do this one, but he doesn't. They dropped him, I guess, by the time we get to The Last Jedi. So, and this was a pretty iconic poster. I have, when I see it, it sparks some memories. This is our first look. We have John Boyega back there. We have Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher. Daisy Ridley centered in there, and then you got Kylo Ren in the background with his cross-guard lightsaber. You got the Millennium Falcon. So this is very Star Wars-y. And how many of you went to opening night?
Oh, yeah.
I did not.
I don't think it was opening night, but it might have been opening weekend.
Okay.
I was still protesting, actually.
I went to I hadn't heard what it was like because I went to the very first screening in the UK. So nothing was out yet. No, there were no leaks, and it was Odeon Leicester Square, completely sold out. I was front and center with my ex-wife, actually, I think.
Opening night, and it was a circus, as you would imagine. When I was a kid, I couldn't go to opening nights, in 1980 and 1983 and all that. But I did go to from 1999 to 2019. I went to every opening night to every Star Wars film, and so I was there. In Texas. My dad flew in. One of my best friends at the time flew in, and we were all Star Wars buddies, and we went to go see The Force Awakens, and a couple things that I think they got right in terms of like archetypal imagery. You get these. I'll never forget. These images of like the Star Destroyer in the sand.
This is a really important image. I mean, that was one of the things. Oh, this looks really cool. You're seeing the aftermath of the Empire. I mean, that scene and this still that you've got up on screen communicates that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because the last time we saw Star Destroyers, the Emperor was alive. Vader was in the middle of turning to the good side. The rebellion was making their way into the interior of the Death Star. I mean, that was the last time we saw these things.
Yeah.
And, now you skip ahead and it's like, this is a graveyard a planet where these giant ships. Remember, the opening scene to A New Hope was the Corellian ship fires overhead, and then you get this unforgettable scene of a ship that comes, this arrowhead shaped ship that comes overhead and just keeps going and going. So one of the first memories of the general public of Star Wars was these Goliath starships, these massive starships. And now look at them. They're leftovers in the desert and forgotten. So that was a pretty striking image. I thought that they did well in terms of presenting some visual imagery for the sequel trilogy.
Oh yeah, they have lots.
They do have. There is a bunch. Now in terms of the actual story, how did everybody feel coming out after seeing it the first time?
Well, I was disappointed when I left.
I'll let someone else go first.
Yeah, I was. I'll let you go, Keith. Go for it.
Okay, because my initial response was, okay, this is J.J. Abrams. I wasn't impressed with what he did with Star Trek. Oh, what a lucky dog he's going to get to do Star Wars 2. Like, how many people on the planet get to do anything like that? But then when we saw some of the teaser trailers and some of the footage and some of the imagery, that I was, okay, all right, maybe, we're going to do something really good here. Energy was electric when we went to see it. I went to see it with my cousins and aunt and uncle. We all went. It was a packed house. It wasn't opening night, but it was like opening weekend. I mean, I was there with a lot of people. But ultimately, when I left, I was like, wait a minute, that was it? Like, it was like we reran Star Wars. I mean, it was like, okay, they went a very safe route with it. I wasn't, I wasn't like jumping off the wall or anything after this first one, but it was kind of a similar experience to me with the Phantom Menace. There was all this electricity around this. Everybody was there, and then, okay, was this really what it was supposed to be? And in my opinion, it was not. So that's how I remember leaving the theater.
Yeah. For myself, I'll just give a little background why I wasn't there for opening night. Saw the movie in 1977 with my mom. It was a very strong bonding moment, and it was really incredible. Saw all three movies again with my mom, but the prequels I saw by myself. I was still super, super excited for them. The first one was like, oh, okay. Second one, oh my God, what they messed up the story. And then by the last one, I was like, okay, thank God it's done. I'm never going back to the theater to see Star Wars again. And to this day, I've kept my promise on that. It wasn't that the last, Revenge of the Sith was that bad. I just felt like it was empty. Like I felt like it should not have been the end of the story. Anyway, but moving forward, I kind of avoided everything Star Wars, and just on the sidelines, it was just like, oh yeah, hey, Star Wars, really nice to see you again, and like not really engage in anything until Obi-Wan really like kind of brought me back. But I did see this when it came out on video, and when it came out or on streaming, and I actually got chills seeing it for the first time. I was like, wait a minute, this feels like the old Star Wars. And I was excited because they nailed a lot of the things from the first movie. And that's essentially what they did here. When I think about it, they basically told, and everybody, it's not news, this is something that's been said, they basically took the first movie and redid it. But what I also think now, looking back at the whole thing, is that this was the softest reboot that they could think of. They really wanted to get rid of the old characters and bring in new characters, and this was their idea of like, hey, how do we tell the first Star Wars story, but also make it a reboot, but not make it a reboot to the point where fans are going to start eating each other in the theater. And so this was their answer, I feel like, and based on what's been going on, I feel like, or what we got in the rest of the sequel movies, it felt like that, like exactly that. They were trying to get rid of the old, what you knew about Star Wars, and bring in an all new Star Wars.
That was one thing that frustrated me as well, because some of the reports, I would read a lot of the reports on Variety and things. You'd read some of the interviews, and they kept saying we got to get away from the old old Star Wars. We need new Star Wars. And they kept repeating that. And I was like, but you're still in the Skywalker saga. So,
Yeah.
you know, you don't have to get rid of it yet. I get that it's a good idea to have new Star Wars coming up and to have new Star Wars and to do new stories. But that's not what the episode 7, 8, 9 are. Episode 7, 8, and 9 are the completion of those original stories. And so that was like rubbing me the wrong way, that they kept trying to get away from Star Wars at the same time that they were right back in it.
Yeah.
And retro, I guess I felt better coming out of The Force Awakens than I did Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace was so different that it was jarring.
Yeah, it was. I kind of liked it.
I mean, well, it's grown on me tremendously. But
yeah.
In 1999, when you don't know what this is, and you sit down and here's the opening scroll, and they're like, 2 Jedis are dispatched for a trade dispute. I was like, okay, maybe this will get better. And then, then you've got these droids, and they seem more advanced than the original trilogy. So, and then, there's like these lush planets and Gungans, and I was just very disoriented when the Phantom Menace came out. And so I left scratching my head from the Phantom Menace. Force Awakens got a better grade for me on the feels, because it felt and looked like Star Wars. It had some great scenes. I remember the Millennium Falcon, that great corkscrew move in the desert where it goes up from the trailer and it swoops down and it skims one of the dunes as it comes up, and a TIE fighter is coming up right behind it. That's just instant pleasure for me. I mean, that's what I want to see. That is beauty. That's Star Wars. We did get some lightsaber action. I actually thought Rey in The Force Awakens looked the part. She's actually scavenging in a Star Destroyer in that, which establishes a skill set, which does actually come back later. How she could fly the Millennium Falcon was not quite explained, but there did seem to be an effort at world building in The Force Awakens that is almost entirely absent after this movie. Entirely absent. They were also more patient in this film, and the costumes look good. I actually still believe that Daisy Ridley at that time, 2015 Daisy Ridley, looked pretty iconic as Rey in terms of burning the image in your mind.
Yeah.
A lot of people were very excited about her.
Yeah, and I think even throughout the whole thing, she looked great. It was how she was written and how they kind of left her character on the editing floor or wherever it was. They forgot to give her a character. And the whole time she has like a few expressions. There's the shocked expression and maybe a smile, or it just doesn't really, I can't really tell you what she says. If she ever says anything iconic, something that makes me want to play the character or be her. And she's got the look. The actress is doing the best she can. The story did not complete her actual personality or her arc or anything that really leaves you with a strong
and we'll get
impression.
into that. Yeah, the way, and real quick, I wanted to, Lance, in terms of how you felt after the first time seeing it at the theater, where did that leave you?
Well, my very first thought when I came out the cinema was the word safe. This film felt very, I mean, you guys have said a lot of it already. It was like, okay, what elements can we take from the first film that people are going to like, that we can reuse again? It had some good moments. It had some great visuals, but fantastic display on top of cake doesn't mean that cake is going to be easy or fun to digest. And when I thought about it more, and I went and saw it a second time, and my then partner wasn't impressed with it at all. She didn't like it. She didn't like Rey. She didn't like the character. She thought John Boyega was good. In fact, I thought John Boyega was the best thing in it.
He was great.
And I liked his storyline, and I thought he was going to be the lead character. I thought he was going to be our Luke Skywalker across from Daisy Ridley, and I thought they were going to be the couple that had a will they, won't they romance thing.
Yes.
Throughout the trilogy, which is exactly what should have happened, because that would have been great. but that didn't happen. But and I just, after watching it again, the thing that really rankled me from the word go, and it still annoys me now, and this is the best film of the three new ones, is the whole Planet Starkiller plot. I absolutely hate it. I absolutely hated that. This whole super weapon thing. This time it's not just a Death Star. We built it in a planet. It's a bigger spaceship again, and it's exactly what they did in that Star Trek Wrath of Khan reboot, where they give him a really big ship. It's just not interesting. It's not exciting. We've seen this plot before. We've seen the X-Wing have got to fly in and blow it up, and we've seen all that before. A space battle with a smaller fleet with bigger stakes for the characters involved would have been much, much more interesting. And I don't like these super weapon plots anymore. They're fine in a James Bond movie, but Star Wars has done them now. So we focus on the actual narrative of the characters and
what's funny too,
stakes.
Lance, is in 1983, people were like, "Oh my God, another Death Star!"
Yeah.
Star Wars
kind of worked. That kind of worked. I did feel that when I watched that, but we got to see a lot of cool new things because it wasn't properly built, so they were flying around inside it. So there was enough stuff that was new that made it interesting. Plus, don't forget, we did have the big space battle, which was actually more interesting than the Death Star. The two fleets going head to head, all those wonderful, amazing shots that we'd never seen before of fighters, whizzing between all these ships, firing at each other and stuff.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. I've been waiting to see a space battle that big, and for a long time, Jedi was my favorite of the three original films because of that battle. But that was when I was a kid. When I grew up and became mature, changed.
To this day, I still feel a boyish thrill when I watch Return of the Jedi, and right from the moment that Akbar's like, the shield is down, and then they're like,
commence attack on the Death Star's main reactor.
Yeah, but just the way it's filmed, where they all cut, he's like, I'm right behind you, and he flies in, and they're going through the superstructure, and I'm already on my way out, and the music is playing. It's some of the most exciting science fiction, space swashbuckling battles that you could possibly imagine.
I used to have that entire sequence, Doug, on my Walkman. I had it recorded, that in whole Jedi. I had it on, and I used to listen to it on the train, and when I was doing my paper route, and I'd be bombing around on my bike, and I'd be whizzing through roads just so I'm already on my way out, thinking all of that. It was quite
isn't
funny.
it great?
I love it.
Just listening to you guys talk about that, and also remembering how many fans were knew line by line so many scenes. I could play it out, and did their own little fan movies with it. I've not seen one fan movie except to mock the sequels. If it's something to mock, they're all over it, but not to emulate and replicate
and celebrate or celebrate.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and also
just
the iconic. You want to play those characters. I will put on an Akbar costume just so I could say it's a trap, just for that. I would do that.
I might still have that costume retro, so I can probably make that a reality for you.
It's a trap. You can. There are just certain moments, that the original captured, and even the sequels had moments. I'm sorry, the prequels had moments where you will never forget those moments. But this group is just
was
not
so
iconic.
Right. It was rather underwhelming. And like Lance just said, the impact of the Battle of Endor in space was so massive, and it was so fast, and there was so many ships. And we're talking 1983. There's just nothing like this. Not even Star Wars or Empire was like this. So it was definitely something special. And so to take that and then show me these guys at night trying to hit a target to strafe and bomb this one little hexagon on the planet's surface, it just doesn't measure up. So, knowing that, try something else, come up with another plan.
I'm just looking at this picture here is just like nauseating. Like what you built into a planet.
Yeah, I mean, I just think this whole plot was absolutely ridiculous. They never would have been able to keep that secret, for one thing.
Yes.
Because it would have required thousands of people to build it. Or, well, maybe a few people and thousands of droids, but droids can become independent, as we know. So I just, that whole story with that thing was just nonsense.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that at all. But, you know. Can talk about the list of things I did like about the movie. It's a very small list.
It is a small list. One of the things I liked was Kylo Ren freezing the laser in midair.
Oh.
I thought that was cool in the beginning when he stops the laser, but someone shoots at him and he stops it. I thought that was pretty cool. I did like the crossguard lightsaber. I thought that was pretty cool. I did like his aesthetic and look. However, when I remember sitting in the theater watching this, and I remember being kind of irked by his emotionalism. Like when Vader got mad, you in the theater got a little nervous. You're like, oof,
somebody's gonna die.
This is a counselor. You got nervous. When Kylo Ren pulled out his lightsaber and just started slashing all the equipment, I was just like, he's just throwing a temper tantrum.
It was a bit more. It's my party. I'll cry if I want to.
Is there a baby upset or something?
Yeah, I was very unsettled by what I thought what was a weaker villain. He looked good, but he didn't play well, and he also says in the movie, "I feel the pull to the light," and I was like, "Oh, he's all right." Dude, he's already. So to me, that also suggests. I was like, of course, he's going to turn to the good side at the end. Now, I heard that the original script treatments weren't going to do that. That they were going to make him get worse and worse and more Sith-like. However, at the end of the day, he did turn to the good side. So now it seems rather anticlimactic if in the opening scenes with this guy, he's like, "I feel a pull to the good side," and then by the end of the movie, or end of the trilogy, he's like, "I turned to the good side." It's like, yeah, we knew. Vader, no one saw that coming. That was incredible.
There was a lot of.
I thought Kylo Ren looked good, but didn't pull it off.
There was a lot of potential interesting setups here, like, Daisy Ridley's character. I can't remember one line she said in the entire movie. By the way. That's weird for me. But this whole premise of who is she, where does she come from, and who were her parents?
That was big. That was big.
That was all. Yeah, that was all really interesting, and I thought that was going to go a really interesting direction. And we found out later, of course, and I said this last time, the biggest mistake that this trilogy ever made, that Lucasfilm ever made, that Kennedy ever made, was this whole thing wasn't planned out properly.
Yeah,
it was just, we'll make one film and then we'll see how we go, and hey Ryan, do what you want.
Lance, in 2015 when this came out, at this stage, it felt like they had a plan, right? Because they had
because this film is one big setup plus a mission at the end, but it's 2/3 setup, establishing the new characters in the world, and I liked most of the new characters, but they just didn't do much with them. But yeah, it was I remember talking with people. It was like, I just remember it was a very safe start. I didn't like the super gun, but there were some cool scenes. There were some cool characters. The next film will make or break this trilogy. The next one's got to be amazing. It can't just be.
Well, they pay it off.
They had to pay it off.
And the middle film is probably the worst of the three. Who wants to see a 2-hour chase sequence?
I'm looking at the movie review that I never did publish. That's like, it's 45 pages long.
You did a 45-page review?
Oh yes.
Was that your voiceover for a potential video? Or?
I was going to review it, and I didn't post it because it was too bad. Because I was just like, I had like 20 questions, and it was really, I'll have to go back and edit that if I ever publish it, but it's really like I really went to town on it. But there were like over 20 questions that I had for what was to happen in the future. And one of my comments was, if they pay it off in the next 2 movies, this is going to be a brilliant film. Definitely a movie I'll be watching over and over again.
Yeah.
And yeah.
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 Well, and
that never happened.
I've only seen it twice.
There were a lot of things in The Force Awakens that seemed like they had a plan for. So, like Snoke, I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" Right? Who's this guy?
Ooh.
There were theories, because of the wound in his head, that somehow it was Anakin was involved in this with this guy somehow, and or Darth Plagueis. There was all these theories, and I got excited. I was like, it has to be Darth Plagueis because that will tie up the full circle for the Sith. The Plagueis is the guy that somehow trained Palpatine, and he figured out how to cheat life. So maybe we thought Palpatine thought he killed him, but he didn't, or something. So there was a lot of theories going on out there, and but he had to be important because the idea of evil reconstituting is a common, timeless, archetypal theme. And here it seemed to be in place that evil has reconstituted around this guy who is the number one. Kylo Ren was number 2. So this guy was emperor-like. And we don't know who he is. And they punted on that. But obviously we'll find out soon, who Snoke is. And then I have to bring this up because this was something that bothered a lot of people for good reason.
Yes.
Han Solo dies in the first film.
Yeah.
Yes.
A complete mystique
he is impaled.
I'm one of the few people that didn't have a problem with this, but I do need to caveat that response. I didn't have the problem with the concept of them killing him off. I thought that was a good idea. Unfortunately, because of what happens with Kylo Ren afterwards, this death kind of becomes a bit meaningless. So it's not a setup. It's not a great death that's really going to have consequences or payoffs later. It really wouldn't have meant anything one way or the other. I mean, it was the only reason that Harrison Ford agreed to do the film. He actually had it in his contract that they were going to kill him off. That was the only reason he agreed to do it. He wanted to die in Jedi. He wanted to get killed in Jedi, and Lucas had to talk him out of it and probably bump him up some more money. But
poor Harrison Ford, because they did drag him back for Rise of Skywalker.
I mean,
they still needed him.
It goes back to something I said on the last episode, which is if this had been planned properly, any filmmaker worth their salt, the same way as Peter Jackson did Lord of the Rings, you would have done a 9-month block of principals, and you would have shot all of your older leads scenes and got them for all 3 films there and then. Yes. So I think we still could have had Han Solo die. Maybe at the end of the second film would have been better because that would have been a great cliffhanger. And if it had been interwoven in a consistent plot, I would have been fine with his death. When I came out of the movie, I remember thinking, I didn't see that coming until right at the last minute, and then I thought, God, they're going to kill him, and literally 10 seconds later, he was gone. But so I thought I like the fact that they took a risk. I like the fact they took a risk, but it doesn't play off ultimately.
And there are so many ways they could have gone with it, and I didn't mind him dying. I didn't enjoy him dying the way he died, and the psychological profile of Kylo Ren is interesting in this movie that they don't pay off later, and that was kind of the thing that kind of, why did he kill his father only to become good again? And like, this should have been the crossroads. Like, if you're gonna be a bad guy, this is it, because this is unredeemable at this point. He's not redeemable at this point. So you left with this character who doesn't really have a faith of any kind, and so you lose something for him. Is he really a good character, a bad character? It's that whole thing that a lot of these shows have been doing, is the bad guy really the bad guy, or trying to make like bad characters good, which is that was never Star Wars. You had a specific, the Jedi were good, the Sith were bad, or you had a bad character, good character. It wasn't,
Right.
this gray area is where a lot of modern writers get mixed up on, and you can lose the audience there. That's where you lose the audience. We don't have anything to fight for. Who are we fighting for? You can't fight
Right.
for a
Well, and
guy
people
who
always
just
say, well,
killed his father.
Well, and in the first trilogy, Vader turns to the good side. So I've read articles where people try to defend all this and be like, well, Vader, was redeemed. I'm like, no, not all the way. If Vader had survived, he would have been killed by public, capital punishment for what he's done.
Yeah.
But he dies. So he redeems himself on a spiritual level, but his character was not like all the way back to the good side.
I mean, he redeemed himself in death as well, which is, it's just the last few minutes of his life.
He risked his life to kill the Emperor.
Yeah.
And there's great commentary by Chris Gore talking about how falling into an endless abyss is how villains are killed. The Emperor, Darth Maul, Hans Gruber. The big fall is how you kill villains. So this seemed a little off kilter for a hero to go this way.
And also, I feel like Han Solo in general in this movie is just poorly. I hate his presentation, because he's back to doing the same dumb thing he was doing before. He's no longer like the relationship between Leia and Han is just broken up, and it is just a memory. It really had no honor to the sequels at all.
I would have preferred the Han Solo that was presented in the Timothy Zahn trilogy, which is, as far as I'm concerned, is more canon than this, because that was a much more.
Because the characters felt authentic.
Yeah, he was a parent. They were together.
Yeah.
They were raising these twins. That was a great idea, and they had to protect them, and so he had different responsibilities. He still had his quirkiness and his cool lines and whatever, and he was still Han Solo, but he was Han Solo who had who got grounded by responsibility, and I think we could have had that version of him, and it still would have been interesting with a completely different plot and script.
Well, the way where we left off with Han was in Return of the Jedi, and we met him in A New Hope when he was selfish and cavalier and swashbuckling and a little vain, rough around the edges. And by the end of Return of the Jedi, he makes it's a show of maturity. He thinks he's a rival with Luke for Princess Leia. And he's like, when Luke gets back, I won't get in the way. That is a demonstration that he has matured, right?
Yes.
He's going to be the bigger man. And, she gives him the good news. Hey, he's not a rival to you. He's my brother. And Han's like, this is the greatest day of my life. So Han's happy, but you get a sense that he's now worthy of a romantic partner. In Empire Strikes Back, he was kind of pulling the scoundrel moves, which were working, but they don't necessarily have long-term implication. By the end of Return of the Jedi, you think this man is now worthy of Princess Leia, and you got the sense that he had kind of grown up. So yeah, when we catch up with him in The Force Awakens and he's back to doing low-level scoundrel work, it was very confusing and hard to reconcile. I think it was only made up for the fact that we're looking at Han Solo again. I think we just were happy to see him, and so he was forgiven a little bit, but ultimately, this was bad writing, bad character writing.
Yeah,
I think we also have to get.
I was going to say
What's
also the coincidence of Rey meeting Han Solo out in the wild, pretty much in the Millennium Falcon, is like, well, this is highly, there's too many moments that are just so contrived. It
convenient.
Just not the natural flow of storytelling. that just wasn't
Right.
available in this film.
I was
Well,
going
and
to
it's
say
become a
two
meme
things
now. It's like,
with regard to that death. That first of all, and that Chris Gore, this did launch, I believe, some of the Chris Gore's commentary that, like you were talking about, Han Solo falling off into the abyss, which robbed you of something meaningful like Spock's funeral. Like the death of Spock in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is such a fantastic death that Han never got something like that. And if you were going to kill Han, you should have been able to see the character's reactions to all of that. And so many people did not forgive, my aunt included, when they know Han is dead, that Leia runs to hug Rey instead of Chewbacca. At the end of it. There isn't much response to Han's death at all, but really the only thing is Leia running to hug Rey for some reason instead of Chewbacca. But
he was the big walking carpet from A New Hope.
Right. One of the most interesting theories out of this movie, I thought, regarded this scene, because, remember when you actually see him, like you're looking at Han's face when all of a sudden the lightsaber's activated and he dies, right? And then he falls off.
Right.
And one of the most interesting conspiracy theories that I remember from this movie, to go forward, a theory moving forward in the idea is that Han killed himself in this scene. And I thought that was really interesting because you had the conflict within Kylo Ren. And the theory went that, okay, if Kylo Ren kills his father right there, if he kills Han right there, he's going to be irreparably evil.
Yes.
But instead, what Han Solo did, because you never actually see it on screen, you're looking at his face, is that he flips Kylo Ren's lightsaber and turns it on and kills himself. And that way, Kylo Ren never actually killed him. And
I like that.
For Kylo Ren to... And if that had been true, that would have been a really cool twist on that.
And that would have been great to maybe put in the third film, after we've seen him do some cool shit.
Or that put it in the second, and then Kylo Ren's, if you're going to do the redemption thing, in the third.
Yeah. I mean, second or third movie.
Well, and the second he falls off that bridge, the chance that Han, Luke, and Leia are all going to be together again is over.
Yes,
it's over in 2015, and that's sad. I remember being like, "Oh, Han's gone." I was like, "Oh, that sucks." I guess we're not going to really get the reunion. And I didn't realize at the time just how egregious that really was.
That's such a good point. We want that scene that we had in Return of the Jedi, where they all
they're all together,
meet up. Yeah, and there's that moment of happiness. I mean, no doubt we'll get on to what they did to Luke, but I was really that for me as well was like, I was really disappointed that scene wasn't there, and that scene could have been in the second movie. I would have been fine with that, as long as again the story earned getting there, And
I think it was also false advertisement because they really sold the movie on the three of them being together in a lot of the promotion, and so we were like, the band's back together, and no, it's not.
So we have to address, there's many things to address if we wanted. I tried to home in on a couple. The death of Han is a big one.
We went deep on that one.
But he's also the first of the legacy characters to really die. And it happens, it leads, the sequel trilogy leads off with the death of a legacy character, which then prevents the reunion. So that's done. He's in a pit. And then finally we get Rey fighting Kylo at the end. And remember, John Boyega wields a lightsaber, or Finn wields a lightsaber at one point. So there was some, suggestion of perhaps a Jedi future for him.
On the cover of the artwork, he's holding he's got his lightsaber. I was expecting that. I was like, okay, we're here we go.
Yeah. The first time I saw it, I thought he was the one that was using the Force on the lightsaber. But it was cool to see him wield it. I didn't mind that he lost to Kylo, because you should lose when you fight the villain in the first movie, right?
Yes.
Trilogy.
Yes.
for me, so one thing, I analyzed Darth Vader one time, and what makes him so compelling as a villain, why do we like Vader so much, and why do we like Luke so much? Why do we like Star Wars? Well, Vader bats 1,000. The guy doesn't lose. You know, he beats Obi-Wan Kenobi. He captures the princess. He takes out the entire rebel fleet, or, you know, the entire rebel squadron pretty much single-handedly. He's the only survivor of the Death Star. You know, Empire Strikes Back. He takes down Hoth. He takes down that base. He advances with the AT-ATs. He takes down Luke. He captures Han. He outsmarts him. And then you get to Return of the Jedi. The guy hasn't lost yet.
Yeah.
So he needs some comeuppance. And so when Luke finally beats him, which, by the way, Luke beats him spiritually. He doesn't beat him in combat. The same. Well, he does, but Vader isn't dead yet. It's Vader who beats the Emperor. So defeating a villain like that, you earned something, man. You did something if you could beat this guy. Kylo, when I was watching this at the theater, he's defeated the first time Rey faces off with him. And I thought to myself, wow, boy, that's not good. That can't be good if she's already beaten him. You know, so I was trying to figure, I was like, I don't think I like. So when she beats him the first time, I thought maybe, you know, I kept waiting for him to get back up. And I was like, no, Rey wins. She beat Kylo Ren in their first fight, and she was never trained as a Jedi Knight. You know, and we all have memories of what Luke Skywalker looked like in Empire Strikes Back when he's like, you'll find out full of surprises. Yeah, 2 moves later, Luke's on his butt and the lightsaber is disarmed. So, you know, you need training. You know, it's not easy to fight a guy trained with the Sith who knows how to use a lightsaber. And yet Rey ends up beating him.
Yeah.
So this is where as much as I had some positive feelings toward The Force Awakens, I had some issues structurally with it, and this being the largest. This I thought was going to be problematic moving forward if we're going to be convinced that Kylo Ren is a serious villain.
Well, one thing I thought here was that if they could have had an answer to that in the second movie or the third movie or whatever, like she had training, and a lot of people had theories that maybe she blocked it out because of the trauma, and that now she's rekindling some training with Luke perhaps. And so this is where we're kind of, you know, surprised and befuddled, like, where did she learn, like, why is she so much better than this guy? That, you know, like, you know, he's physically stronger, obviously, and then also, like, okay, so with the Force, it doesn't matter. You know, Yoda proves that you don't have to be stronger; you just have to be well trained and just be better. But why is she better?
And
they never explain that.
If there was something in her background about that, like that's a good suggestion that, you know, maybe she was traumatized by something and she's literally blocked it out, wiped it from her memory, or someone else has wiped it from her memory. You could have done a really good flashback where suddenly she has, you know, something triggers her and she sees all these images, and we see her, a younger version of her fighting and training and shit. And suddenly so many things would have been justified. And you could have easily put that as a scene near the beginning of the second film, which would have strengthened the narrative of the first film and justified a lot of this crap. But that didn't happen, so it's just crap.
Maybe with the guidance of Maz Kanata, who is a very interesting character, but she kind of disappears later. Like,
and never really answers her question.
You've got to show these things. It can't just be an assumption on the part of the audience. We need to. If these things happen, we need to see them. Show, don't tell, you know?
Yeah. They didn't even tell. That was the other part.
They didn't show or tell.
They didn't tell. Like at least Obi-Wan said, oh, yeah, the Jedi Knights, you know, back in the first movie. And we got in our mind some idea. But they didn't even give us an idea. That means they didn't have an idea, which means they didn't have a plan for this whole thing.
And think about it. Lucas, when he wrote those lines, he was, you know, your father fought in you fought with my father in the Clone Wars. Well, that's world building dialogue right there. Now we know there's something called the Clone Wars, and it makes you in 1977 go, Clone Wars. What the heck? Did they clone a bunch of people and fight with armies of clones?
Yes.
Immediately, your imagination starts running. So I love world building dialogue. It was a throwaway line when Lucas was writing it. It's just background discussion. They had a 7-season miniseries based on this one line in the Clone Wars. So, we didn't get a lot of that. So you're right. They needed to address it. And when I left the theater after Force Awakens, I had positives. I had a lot of positives as well, but I couldn't get over her winning this battle. And I was like, Dad, you don't understand. Like, there's no growth arc for her if she already won. So we were getting into a debate, and my dad changed my mind. He said in this scene that I've got pulled up right here, he's like, what music do they play? If you remember, they're close up like this, and she closes her eyes, and you see the blue and the red reflecting off of her face. And I'm like, what music do they play? And my dad's like, Luke's theme. So that theory that Retro is talking about, the idea that she does have training and she's recalling it in this moment when she's facing evil nose to nose, Luke's theme is being played there. So my dad convinced me that absolutely, there's no question about it. That's what this scene means, that she's remembering Luke Skywalker's training, and that when she beats Kylo, it was her training that kicked in. Which made me say, well, okay, then that means in the next movie, Kylo's going to have trained. He's going to be much stronger, and he's going to finally beat her in the second movie, that this was actually an Easter egg to her training with Luke. So that one idea got in my head enough to make me react to this positively, because at the time, I was just so sure that that's where this was going. So sure. Didn't even question it, actually. And now I'm embarrassed because when I see this, I'm like, No,
Nope.
she just figured it out. She just decided to beat him at that moment and beat him. So, it makes it even worse now because I don't even have that false hope.
Really bad. It's really bad. When you look at that first movie again, which is almost nearly unwatchable, it's just like, oh my God, what happened? They just dropped the ball on this idea. Could have been amazing. Could have been brilliant, in fact.
I think it would have been better, and I know this is bizarre to say, it probably would have been better if they just stuck with J.J. Abrams for all three.
Oh, yeah.
I would
agree.
That they would at least have continuity of ideas.
Right.
Yes, Yes, I agree.
You don't have to spend a lot of time reversing movies.
Yeah.
I
And
think
the battle of the directors.
Yeah.
He would have taken the characters a better direction than what we got. I don't think we would have got an amazing trilogy. We might have got a good trilogy if he'd done the other two, as opposed to a very
serviceable.
It would have been better than what we got, because basically it's like two directors battling it out on screen. And they really don't care about the fans and what we really want. They're just doing whatever they can to undo what the last director did. It's just awful.
I'll just wrap up the general event here. We met up with Leia. We caught up with her. She's a general now, which I wasn't too happy about because I don't see her as a general. I see her as the Supreme Chancellor. But we caught up with Leia. She's still involved. We caught up with Han. He's a smuggler again, but then he dies. And then we don't really catch up with Luke until the final shot of The Force Awakens. And I will say, by the time Luke whips off his hood like this, there was a cheer on opening.
Yeah, there was
a cheer.
Big cheer in the cinema with us as well.
Yes, sir. Yeah. It was exciting. It's like, there he is. Luke Skywalker. I mean, he was almost mythical in 2015, even in like Western civilization. And here he is. Whips off his hood. He's an older man now. He's a Jedi still. He's isolated. And he turns around and he faces the camera. And of course, one of the final shots here is Rey handing him his lightsaber, which it's his lightsaber, which she got from Maz Kanata. Which means that the last time he saw that lightsaber was Bespin, when Vader cut it off his hand and it tumbled into that pit. So somehow it's back. There's a sense of continuity. I talk often about the archetype of sacred fire the idea of continuity of something important or symbolic.
Yes.
This has that. It's come back into the story. It's the original. It was your father's lightsaber.
It was his
This
father. I
was
was
the one
just
that
gonna
Ben
say that.
handled.
Yeah, this is his dad's lightsaber. Like, that means something. That means something. It's the first lightsaber he ever had too. His first lightsaber. So
Yep.
yeah.
So
I mean, and also the expression on that face suggests something massively emotional is going to be exchanged between these two people, and I think that was the original intention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and in a way, it's another call to adventure for Luke, right? He's obviously living in isolation, and somebody from the outside comes in and offers him this thing, and this is very much a call to adventure. And when you think about how the scene concludes in the next film,
he's been hiding out for no reason. Like, we don't know the reason. He's
Yeah.
been hanging out for no reason on this island.
He's got a choice of adventure or
Come back.
drinking more green boob gunk. There's not a pretty clear cut choice which is more fun. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's the Force Awakens as a story. I
just wanted to mention something before we go further forward. I'm going to share my screen if that's all right with you.
Yes.
So there are 3 people that have got writing credits on this film, which I think is quite important to mention. So we have J.J. Abrams, who probably didn't come on when the script was first being written, but what he would have done as a director with a lot of clout is he would have put a polish on it. Now, what I wanted to mention was what were his writing credits prior to that time. And it's interesting to look. So probably the biggest thing he'd done was Mission Impossible 3 and Super 8, which didn't do terrifically financially, but I did really enjoy Super 8. Then we have one of my favorite writers of all time, Lawrence Kasdan, who's probably was involved in, I think, the first draft. A writer of incredible caliber, has written some of the best movies ever made, including Raiders of the Lost Ark and my personal favorite Western, Silverado. Then we have Michael. I'm not sure how to pronounce that surname. So he is the least experienced writer of the 3. He did Oblivion with Tom Cruise, which is actually a movie I really like. And he had just done the second Hunger Games film, which I suspect was probably the segue into getting onto this team. He did some rewrites for Inside Out. That was at the time when Disney was taking over Pixar as well. So you've got these 3 guys potentially sort of overseeing this story. So there are 2 things that arise from this. One is Kasdan and Michael did a script together. J.J. Abrams came in and made small changes or maybe massive changes. Or the 3 of these guys together turned over an interesting script or a strong script. So I would expect a strong script. These are guys that are born in the 60s or earlier. So these are not 30-year-olds that have just come to work for Disney and have been brought up in a different culture. These are guys that lived and breathed Star Wars like the rest of us. So what I suspect is that there was meddling from above, and that would have been from Kennedy. So I can't hold Kasdan and is it Arden? I don't know how you pronounce that. Entirely responsible for this debacle, because I suggest whatever they put forward on the page, especially Kasdan, who really understands as a writer, he really understands character arcs, narratives. He would have had an intention probably for all 3 films with anything he set up in this movie. I don't think these are the guys that can be held responsible for this debacle, even though they are the 3 people that have the screenplay credits. So
And
I thought it was worth
don't
mentioning
think,
it.
and I don't think anyone believes that they are, because the next leg of this was solely in the hands of one person, and we know what they did with it. But also there are certain J.J. Abrams like things that the mystery boxes. There were tons of those mystery boxes in the story, which is okay for the first movie. It's actually, good to have a couple mystery boxes to reveal later. There were excessively a large amount, and and some of them were also just, being Star Wars fans. We go through every nook and cranny, like, who's Captain Phasma? What how is her future gonna end up in this whole thing, or anything else. We were just concerned about every aspect of this film when it came out. But the big chunk of it, we now like didn't really complete, because all of the writers from this movie just wasn't in any of the the next movie, didn't have anything to do with the next movie, which is a huge mistake. At least they should have brought Gazin in to go right with the next director. Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like just leaving it in the hands of somebody else was Kathleen's choice to do, and she should have had it more like, okay, well, we are following a story here, and let's make sure we tell the same story. Another piece to that's really kind of upsetting. Well, the fans they really think that and believe, and maybe it's not true, maybe it's a coincidence, that Rey herself is sort of a Kathleen Kennedy insert. Just that's just a fan theory, but it's also disturbing that you can make that kind of connection. You shouldn't be able to do that. You shouldn't be able to.
An interesting parallel with that, where Rey is a person who, on the surface, seems like she can achieve anything, but if you dig a bit deeper, actually has very little talent, and there's nothing underneath. That feels very similar to me.
Oh, I didn't say that part.
No, that's why I'm here, Retro, to say the controversial things. That's why they get me on. That's why they get me on. But you open the door. You set that up.
I'm sorry. It was a can of worms I opened. Sorry. I opened the Pandora's box.
The Force Awakens. We didn't know yet the Kathleen Kennedy signature. We look back now and it's there. But in 2015, when the movie came out, like you said, Lance, there's all these writers, J.J. Abrams. I think she was kind of still safely hidden in the background to some extent at this point in Lucasfilm, where The Force Awakens comes out. And ultimately, this first return to the screen, this first effort by Lucasfilm under Kennedy, is a total success financially. This film did incredible numbers. It smashed the box office. I remember, it packed in people at the theaters for week after week after week. It was pretty incredible seeing how it was still sold out, multiple weeks in advance. I was going to share this too. This is my footage of opening night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Obligatory guy with beard and long hair near the front. Excellent.
I mean, this was your Star Wars crowd. All the way down. All the way down. The line.
That does have energy.
What was the capacity of the screen, Doug?
All the way down and around.
Wow.
But it was packed, and they had like it was only like a military operation, moving people from this screen to that screen and getting these people pre-sat and move. So it was an event, and it was massive. And this film broke records. I was going to share this. To this day, the domestic box office, Star Wars: The Force Awakens is the #1 film all time in the domestic box office here in the United States. So It holds that record. It holds that record now as we speak. And even on the international stage, it is #5. #1 is Avatar.
Top Gun Maverick had grossed $1 billion billion, but maybe I'm wrong.
It
about
did,
that.
but it didn't pass. It didn't
Or
pass.
maybe that was international. That might have
Force
been
Awakens.
internationally, actually.
Well, international number 1 is Avatar. Number 2 is Endgame. Number 3 is Avatar: Way of Water. I don't know how the heck that happened.
Yeah,
Number 4 is
nobody
Titanic.
understands Avatar.
Yeah. And then
And
number
so it's
5
number
is The
5
Force Awakens.
international.
Right. So Kennedy, this made a splash. At this point in time, Kathleen Kennedy did it. She put a female character like she wanted. She launched it. It broke records. When I think about her today, I think that she had in her mind that she knew how to run Lucasfilm, and she had these visions in her head. And here the world seems to be rewarding her. Her vision, whatever it was, she put it out there, and now she made the best Star Wars film, financially speaking, not adjusting for inflation, at the domestic box office. Yeah. So 2015, this is the high watermark for Kathleen Kennedy. She pulled it off. No one could really criticize her. And I think that the overwhelming financial success, both in terms of box office receipts, in terms of merchandising, in terms of everything that The Force Awakens generated, I think it bought her massive insulation when it came time for her to defend her record as things got choppy going forward. I think she did so well out of the gate. And I doubt anyone's going to argue with me on this, but I still think that, Lance, what you said was correct, that this was safe. It was good enough. It was Star Wars enough. And really what drove the demand is still the pent-up love for the original Star Wars by George Lucas. He built that fan base, and we all came out of the woodwork for this one.
Yes.
Well, everybody was wanting to see a good Star Wars film after the really kind of rather lame prequels, and enough time had passed. Digital technology was better. All the ducks that were lined in the row. Oh, yeah. We heard the cast were coming back. It was, so we thought, how bad can this be? It's got to be at least, good, if not great. But yeah, we got a very safe, mediocre film that could have been a great film if, as I said, if the narrative had been, all the setup had actually been utilized going forwards. But much of the film is meaningless because, none of those mystery boxes ultimately had a cuddly toy inside. So, we didn't get the cuddly toy.
Yeah, when my kids and I rewatched all the original trilogy. We rewatched all the prequels. And then I remember my son asked, isn't there another trilogy? I was like, honestly, no, there's not, because there's no story there. They're unwatchable. They're unwatchable films. That guy Snoke, doesn't matter about him. Rey doesn't matter. This guy doesn't matter. Why are they still called the Resistance if they beat the Empire? Why does it? None of it makes sense now.
That's another reason. Did you show the films to your kids in order? I wanted to ask.
Yeah, how did you watch this?
So I think I originally showed it to them in the order they came out, meaning we started with episode 4. However, they were pretty young. When we watched them last summer, we started with episode 1, and it was and we went 1 through 6 in that order. And it's interesting to watch them that way because I watched them actually with my kids, my wife, and my wife's mom. She was, she got into it, and it's quite something to see Anakin turn to the dark side at the end of the 3rd film and then turn back to the good side at the end of the 6th. But to go on to episode 7 actually makes no sense to me. Like it doesn't, there's no continuation of the story from Return of the Jedi. The Jedi never return. So
did you put Rogue One in the middle when you did it the second time, or was that not out yet?
I didn't. No, it was out. I didn't, but I really, really want to. I really want to.
Yeah, I mean, we'll do a separate discussion about it. I like Rogue One. No, people are very divided on it, but I really like it.
So that's The Force Awakens. It came out. It broke the box office record. It certainly whet the appetite for the public for the next film. And there were some murmurings, and at this time they were quiet and they were kind of background. But I remember when they were producing the film, they were like, there's a lot of white actors in the old films. We need to kind of freshen it up a little bit. And, there's the female lead. So they made an effort. It was at least in the conscious mind to break up demographically how Star Wars looked versus The Force Awakens. And so the reason I mention this is because at this point, we're just in a commercial success. We're continuing the tradition of Star Wars, but the culture is right about to change. And it's right around this time that culture started to take started to change on us. And as we'll find out, LucasFilm is going to be right in the heart of that change. So one of the changes that occurred, it started in 2015, the year this came out, but it really caught fire in 2016. And Retro, I'll let you talk about this, was the Oscars So White issue that came out. This became a thing. I remember I was like, oh my God, what's going on? So this begins to shape a narrative in the culture that is definitely going to affect Hollywood, films, and of course the rest of the culture. Now we're staying focused on Lucasfilm, but Retro, did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, just really briefly. There were that particular year, all of the Oscar nominations for acting categories went to all Caucasian actors. And so a lot of people were like kind of concerned. One in particular was Jada Pinkett Smith, who at the time Will was in a movie that she was sure he was going to get nominated for. And, then she started talking about like possibly boycotting the Oscars. And then it started to kind of trickle out to many people. There was a hashtag Oscars So White. And that became sort of a conversation that people were having about the Oscars and why, it very much seemed like anyone else who was of a different ethnicity did not exist in the Oscar conversation. And so it was an interesting idea for myself personally. I was like, why do we need the Oscars for that? Anyway, you could just create your own, another show. But then we'll have another show that, or another ceremony where you're singling out certain people just because of their race or whatever. So it would be nice if everybody was appreciated for their hard work in film. And it was a valid thing, but it was also sort of like a little bit on the petty side. But it was really interesting because it made a lot of people kind of look at the situation, and then suddenly mandates started to appear about how many people of ethnicity was going to be in movies that were coming up for Oscars and stuff like that. That became sort of a thing that matured later into like DEI.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, but this was the early tremors of this, where we began to see how the media itself was going to play a role, media and social media. Jada Pinkett Smith, one person says it and it's spread, how they would begin to have such an impact on the filmmaking process, the writing process, the actor selection, the actress selection. You began to see the media take an active role in Hollywood. And, for me growing up, the media was like Siskel and Ebert. You had guys that loved movies. They would talk about it. And their job was to really let you know, is this a good movie or not?
Yes.
And, mostly you either agreed or disagreed. And so suddenly you started getting people not just saying whether it's a good enough movie. They were saying whether this movie held up to a standard that they themselves in the media were enforcing, that there's this new standard and this film falls short of that standard. It's like, well, what if it's good? It's like, it could be good, but it's still falling short of the standard. And so that put a lot of pressure on the creative process and the business process on, well, how are we going to hold up to the standard that is in the very active in media and on social media and still tell the story we want to tell? And this definitely blows up and becomes a big issue in Hollywood in the coming years. But this is where I began to see it. I remember 2015 is where I sensed a shift in the culture, the awareness, the thinking, the social consciousness of everything. This is where I began to sense it. And Lucasfilm is going to be standing right in the middle of this culture war. But at this point, it's just in the background. We hear it, we heard it, and but then we go back to bed. We're going to enjoy our movies. We're going to go back to watching our movies. So, was there anything else you wanted to say about that, Retro?
No, I think you just summed it up. It was something that that happened, and it was the 2015 movies, and it was the 2006 Oscar. Just so happens that it was hosted by Chris Rock, and so there were lots of jokes on behalf of people boycotting the Oscars, and also just the conversation of inclusion and how it started out being like a very interesting question, but also and something that was needed, but also became then a mandate, which is also like doesn't feel as organic as it should feel. There was just something that seemed wrong about it at the same time.
Well, it's good to be aware of it, right? I think.
Yes.
I think if I think of it, if I were to rank values, for storytelling, good writing, good character, you start ranking. What's the most important things that you keep? That's one of them. How, am I creating a story that's going to appeal to a lot of people? Is there opportunities for all sorts of different types of people here? So it's certainly on the list, but this started to say this needs to be priority number one.
Yes.
At the top of the list, above storytelling, above character development. And so I think my reaction was, it shouldn't be number one. I just don't think it should be number one. So my argument was, where does it fit on that ladder? Where does it fit on the hierarchy? I just know it can't be number one because then, like you said, that's a mandate that really exceeds the creative process. Now you're saying the creative process is subservient to this one value, this one standard. And I think that's where it started to get to be in my headspace at this time, 2015, where I was like, really? So, but to your point too, it's certainly not nothing. It's not. There is merit to to what the case was made. Is like if you say all 20 actors, best supporting actor, best actor, best actress, best supporting actor, all of one demographic, certainly that starts to make you scratch your head too. So there's a case, but the solution is where I began to wonder, and the solution meaning priority number one. I think that's where my issue was. Just as a Star Wars fan.
Yes.
So, but this is, so now we have Force Awakens came out. You are seeing some tremors in the culture that there's new perspectives coming in that are going to affect your Star Wars, folks. It's going to affect Star Trek. It's going to affect Doctor Who. It's like this thinking is going to come into the storytelling space that I think we as fans, it was a very different sensibility in terms of storytelling and movie making. So anyway, there was the next project that came out, and this will be very brief, but it's worth mentioning. It came out in, it looks like September of 2016. So before the next film came out, and it's important for just a couple reasons. Lucasfilm had been making Rebels, this series, and Rebels season 3 came out on Disney XD. I love saying Disney; it's such an old thing, but it came out
Disney XD. I don't even remember what that was.
What's that?
I don't even remember what that was.
Oh, there's the Disney channel, and then there's the XD channel that they had.
Right, and so it came out, and this was mostly under the radar. I totally agree. I didn't even watch all the episodes. I just watched a couple of them. The thing that made Rebels interesting the year before was that James Earl Jones came back, to voice Darth Vader. And that was a big deal in Rebel season 2. So Rebel season 3 comes out. There's Darth Maul. He's back. And another event occurred in Rebel Season 3 that matters. Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was decanonized when Disney bought Star Wars, suddenly makes an appearance in Rebel Season 3. And he was only known for the sequel trilogy that Timothy Zahn wrote in the 90s that was decanonized. So they reintroduced Grand Admiral Thrawn in this. And I'm mentioning this because this does become important later in the Lucasfilm lore that's being created under Kennedy. Secondly, one other thing is introduced in Season 3, something called Purgils. These are whales these are celestial whales that can travel through hyperspace. And these also come into Star Wars canon more prominently in later live action shows. But this is where they came from. They came from Rebel Season 3, which was this quiet little animated show that came out after The Force Awakens and before Rogue One. So, Rogue One. So this is
all right.
This is a spin-off movie from Lucasfilm, hot off the heels of Force Awakens. It's literally a year later.
Yeah, this is when we're supposed to be releasing a Star Wars film every year. So this was Force Awakens. Yes. Now here we're outside of the sequel trilogy, but we still have a Star Wars movie for you next year. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, this was not unreasonable because at the time Marvel was reinventing the long form storytelling with the MCU, with these intersecting worlds. And so, Lucasfilm's like, hey, we're Star Wars. We could do this. So obviously they felt like they could compete in this space, and maybe they could have, it's Star Wars. So, and Rogue One is interesting because this takes place right before A New Hope. This movie fits on the beginning of A New Hope like a puzzle piece. This movie leaves off exactly where A New Hope picks up. So, that's interesting.
Kind of.
Yeah. I've got lots to say about this film.
Yeah. Well, let's get
I'll try and give it short though.
So the lead up to this had some pretty good imagery. I remember watching the commercial and they showed a Star Destroyer. They showed the Death Star being built, and it hit me in the feels because I was like, oh my God, that's like A New Hope. Oh, like, geez, this is like old school Star Wars.
Yeah.
This isn't the sequel trilogy. It's not the prequel. This is like 1970s, 1980s Star Wars.
Yes.
Another female lead. Felicity Jones was going to play another female lead. So there was starting to be a little bit of another female lead. I do remember there was a little bit of that talk early on. But it wasn't egregious. This wasn't fever pitch. And you have a diverse group. Baze and Chirrut are good introductions. You also have Cassian Andor showing up in this film with K2SO, the droid. Bodhi, he's in the. So you are getting a more diverse group in the Star Wars universe. And I would say for the most part, it was mostly successful in this film. My issue with it in a nutshell is that I can't watch this movie from beginning to end, but I can certainly watch the last 30 minutes and absolutely love it.
Yeah. I mean, this was directed by a guy who moved in our circles. So lots of people knew Gareth. I've heard all the stories about what went on behind the scenes, the reshoots and so on. And also, my friend Sharon Duncan Brewster is in it. She's in the Rebel conference scene. She's the senator with the gold dress on, African-American actress or black actress. And because of Sharon, I got to go and see the very first screening of Rogue One, cast and crew screening worldwide. And they had 4 of them on the same day to accommodate all the crew that were based in the UK, and we went to I think there'd been 2 before us in the morning, during the day, and we went to the evening one, completely packed out. And I've got 2 issues with the film, one of which is down to meddling with the edit, and the other one, which I think is a tenuous plot thing that maybe doesn't quite hold up. And I'll mention those briefly, but I will say off the bat, I love this film. I think it's the best of the new Star Wars. It felt like Star Wars. We had really interesting characters. The battle sequence at the end is the best battle sequence since Return of the Jedi. It's not been topped in another Star Wars film. It's really exciting. The stakes go one way, they go another way. And even though the Death Star's there in the background, it's not the ultimate thing that's going on at that time. So the Battle of Scarif I really loved. The two issues with the film were one was the whole story with Forrest Whitaker's character that was cut completely to ribbons. So he feels in the film we got, he feels very inserted, and there's a lot of missing scenes with him. His plot was almost cut entirely after the reshoot, so that doesn't work because of meddling. The other thing that doesn't quite work is, we've got the whole thing of rebel agents have got the plans and all of that. The setup at the beginning of episode 4 feels like there has been a much more concerted, tangible, official mission to go and get these plans, whereas in Rogue One, what actually happens is the whole thing really happens by accident. It's not really a group of official rebel agents that are doing all this shit. It all kind of happens by purely by chance. But I don't mind that. I don't have a big problem with that, because I like the character of Cassian Andor. I mean, the first thing we see him do is kill another guy rather quickly.
Yeah, another rebel.
And that's sort of like, oh my God, so which side is this guy on? This is not sort of good versus evil in the traditional sense. So you didn't quite know where you were with it. The other thing that the film was really very uncharacteristic of Disney is, they kill off almost everybody. Almost everybody dies. And that for me is what made it work. If they had an ending where they got away and all of that, then there's no big sacrifice. That's what made it work to me. And it's got so many great moments. The CGI Leia, it looks a little bit weird, but I do like the brief appearance of Darth Vader. And CGI Tarkin is I think better than CGI Leia.
I actually felt a little thrilled to see Grand Moff Tarkin, because remember when they first show him, he's facing the window, and you just see his reflection, and then suddenly he turns around and it's like Peter Cushing, So, and of course the CGI is not flawless. No. It is flawed. However, it was good enough to create the illusion in that moment in the theater. And I actually liked Grand Moff Tarkin being a character in a film played by Peter Cushing in essence. There was something special about that. And I think it was something special that showed that there was something true to Star Wars lore that they were going to try to bring back for us, the fans. So I appreciated it. And I think I mentioned that, James Earl Jones came back to voice Darth Vader in the cartoon Rebels Season 2. Well, guess what's going to happen in Rogue One? We're bringing Darth Vader back, and he's voiced by James Earl Jones again. And I remember one of the detail that I read in one of the articles leading up to this was that even the eyes of Darth Vader even have the red tint from A New Hope. And I was like, someone's really paying attention to the details,
One other quick story I'll tell you real fast was when we sat down at the screening, a member of the production team came out, and there was a video thanking everybody at the beginning as well. And they said, right, so this comes from the top. Absolutely no one is to post anything on social media until the film is officially released next week, because it wasn't coming out for another week. So what did I do? As soon as I got home, because I liked it so much, I jumped straight on IMDb. The heading of my review, which I'm trying to find for you now, was Gareth Edwards has done it. And mine was the very first review for Rogue One on IMDb. That's the only time
Really?
I've ever been able to do the first review for a massive movie. But I was
A
so
Star
pumped
Wars
when I got
movie.
in, and you know what? I just thought they're not going to mind this review because it's going to sing its praises. So yeah, I wrote it as I came through the door, literally. Yeah. So
Yeah, Rogue
it's
One.
there somewhere.
A lot of times late at night, if I'm like, I got about 30 minutes and everyone else has gone to bed, sometimes I'll fish around for certain movies, some favorite scenes and stuff. Rogue One is in my Rolodex.
Same.
I'll watch the final 30 minutes of the Battle of Scarif with absolute viewing pleasure. It is Star Wars. And I've even watched it enough to where there's 15 seconds of what I would regard as perfect Star Wars. The footage, the pace, the soundtrack, the dialogue, the little stuff. It's up in space where you could see like the space gate below. And
yeah, love all of that.
It's this angled shot, and he's like, "Stay with me!" And they come in and they dive in, and they're going in between these rafters, and one of the X-wings explodes. And then a second later, he's like, they're going in, and you could see in the background out the window from the Imperial these like X-wings knifing in down to the planet surface below, and I was like, this is fantastic. This is like genuine Star Wars, like space action.
By the way, the guy who leads the commando raid, who's a character called Melchi, you kind of see he breaks her out of that prison right near the beginning of the movie, and he's kind of on the radio. He's got that cap on. He takes the cap off just before he dies. That is the actor Duncan Powell. He was the lead in my feature film, The Journey, which is on my YouTube channel. And
You're kidding.
No, and all of his scenes were done as part of the reshoots. So all of the extra reinforcements arriving in that battle, and like more commandos coming down and all of that kind of stuff. None of that was in the original edit. So the original edit was just that little team going down. Yeah, some X-wings got through the shield and they came and gave some air support and stuff like that. But you didn't have all these additional. You just had the original commando team that went in, and so all of his stuff was shot as part of the reshoots. And if you look at the edit, you can tell he's in almost no two shots or anything like that. It's a lot of close-ups and stuff. And so the Battle of Scarif was massively expanded upon. They didn't think there was enough action in the end, 20 minutes or whatever. So a lot of this stuff was added later, which I think was a good thing, because there's shots in the original trailer, several shots actually, which are not in Rogue One, which are all part of the original edit. And they ended up on that tower, and it finished with like a TIE fighter coming up, being flown by one of the bad guys, and they kind of almost got shot, and then the planet blew up. They weren't like sitting watching the sun, the Death Star come up, and so the ending was very different originally. But
yeah, I remember the trailer had some really cool stuff in it. It looked almost artistically shot. Like you said, there's that TIE fighter that comes up, which isn't in the movie. The shot of Krennic walking into the shore. There also the seashore. This archipelago kind of look to Star Wars. That was a new terrain that we got in the shore troopers
and new troopers. Yeah, I was gonna say the shore trooper look.
And the edits. These are actually
it's funny.
ACTs.
It's funny because they went to, I forget where they went to in the Caribbean or somewhere to shoot that shot there on the beach was shot somewhere like that. But then they had to do all these pickups and all these reshoots. So they just built this big bit of sand with some water in Pinewood and chucked a load of palm trees on it with a load of green screen around it. In fact, I mean, that could even be that. I don't know. And the two were blended together, and I think they're blended together quite well.
Yeah. It was thrilling to see AT-ATs again. And then also, this movie gave us what would be a continuation point for Star Wars, which is Andor. This guy, I remember when they announced that Andor was going to get a spin-off series, everyone was like, Andor? This was like the lowest interest name that they could have possibly announced. And funny enough, his show is one of the best shows that they created. And Andor season 2 comes out, and I got to say, I saw the trailer. I don't like the music to the trailer, but the trailer itself looks fantastic. So Andor is oddly becoming one of the bright points of Lucasfilm during the Kennedy era. Diego Luna's portrayal. And then K2SO, I thought he's a great design. He looks like a Star Wars droid, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He does, yes.
Voiced really well as well. So
Yes. Yeah, there was personality to him. He felt authentic. He felt like a good addition. And then Retro,
I mean, he's got that line, hasn't he? Kylo Ren, you are full of surprises, or something. It's very close to that. And that's what's different about Rogue One as opposed to everything else. So I can remember lines from Rogue One. There are some great lines in Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and even it's funny. I used to hate the line, but it's totally grown on me now. And now I actually like the line where the Force is with you, and you're with the Force. How does it go?
Oh yeah, the blind guy. I love his character.
Yeah, Chirrut.
The Force is with me, and I am one with the Force.
I'm with the Force. I'm one with the Force.
I am one with the Force. Yeah, it's great. I love that scene. I think it's great because he's got a different philosophy towards the Force, which is good. You know.
Yes.
Because you look at all the different types of Christianity. That you know, it's not all. Not everybody's got the same philosophy. So I kind of liked that. So that was cool.
Well, and we can't talk about Rogue One without talking about the final scene. I've rewatched this a million times, and it holds up every time. Every time, it's like the film. Everything just kicked up a notch. The way the rebels run at you, they run toward the camera at you to escape, and Vader's back there, and there's the one scene where the guy's banging on the window, and he's like, "Get us out of here!" And I'm like, that's like a trope from a horror movie,
Yeah,
and
it's
it
a horror
works because
scene
they're
for
running
sure.
from Vader.
Yeah.
What did you think, Retro, when you saw Vader come back like this?
I mean, I'm a weird person. I wasn't really. I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool, but I wasn't in love with the scene as much as I think a lot of other people. But it was a highlight of the movie. For me, Rogue One wasn't so exciting. It does take a bit to get started, but the last half I think is really like the best. And we always knew that this was Invader, but I think seeing it on screen is just another level, right? Just to see him do his dirty, his thing. And whenever you get to see Vader do this, it's just like, wow, you're even more afraid of him. And then, it's important for us to realize how intimidating he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can back it up.
What did you think about this? How did you react to it?
I still love this movie, and I love the end scene like you're talking about. But my issue with it always was that I didn't feel like it meshed with the original Star Wars enough. I mean, I was like, okay, they've shown us something really cool, but like when I'm watching the first of A New Hope, is the Battle of Scarif what I think just happened, and Darth Vader hacking his way through something? I didn't get that feel, because they say that a transmission was beamed to this ship by rebel spies. Well, that wasn't what happened. Like Darth Vader, like they've got a physical object. Is Darth Vader's hacking through people, and then like they hand the object to Leia. That when he says a transmission was beamed to this ship by rebel spies, that doesn't at all fit with what I think fit with what they showed me with like Princess Leia escaping like a battle and pursued by Darth Vader. I mean, so when I think about continuity, that's the kind of thing that I think about, that I think is not there, that I wish it was. I mean, yes, as a standalone thing, I like Rogue One, and I like the end and all of that, but I don't think they did a good job with marrying it with the front end of A New Hope. And even it takes away in some sense, this was a movie about something that didn't have to be there. There's been a lot of information or talk about why in the world would they leave this port open that the proton torpedo could go into and destroy the Death Star. But but actually for no reason. You don't have to talk about that because the only person who could possibly make that shot is a space wizard using a specialized weapon, in just the right, after rebel intelligence has gone over those plans with a fine-tooth comb. So first of all, you got to get the plans. Then, according to A New Hope, it wasn't obvious that there was a weakness to this battle station. I always thought about, rebel intelligence, technical intelligence, pouring over, pulling all-nighters, trying to figure out how do we destroy this thing? This thing is coming. Here's the only thing we've got. And ordinary humans can't even make this shot. You have to be a space wizard using the special weapon. And so to come back and try to do this movie, and I says a standalone movie, I think it's fine, it's enjoyable, and I agree with everybody that it's one of the most enjoyable of the movie. But I didn't want to know that, that was something that was specifically engineered into the battle station as a weakness. I wanted to know that those rebel intelligence officers were heroes and that they were able to figure out some way to destroy this battle station. And it was also what, Lance was talking about a moment ago, but, I wanted them to be here. So this changed it. It was a very enjoyable movie. I loved this kind of scene, but to me, it also changed the lore from what I thought was there in the first movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it adjusted it a little bit. I do agree that there are some clumsy points. I think they did enough to make it work. And this isn't even taking away from what you're saying. I agree. If you read the opening scroll to A New Hope, it's like, oh, that makes it sound like they beamed the information up there. And, what you get in Rogue One is much more physical, like you said. I didn't mind that the plot line that they engineered, because honestly, it's been kind of a joke about Star Wars for decades that this exhaust port exists. I remember when Family Guy did their spoof of it.
Stewie, let's get a quote on that.
Can we get a quote on that? And he's like, can't we just put a board over it or something? And he's like, we can't do that. That would destroy retail value. So it's been a joke about this port. So I liked that I didn't mind that Rogue One said it's not that dumb. It was actually a saboteur who put it in the design. And the Empire does say in A New Hope that one officer comes up to Grand Moff Tarkin and he goes, "We've analyzed their attacks, sir, and there is a danger." So there is this thing with stunt fighters, small enough ships that can get up close and maybe pop a proton torpedo in there and set off a chain reaction. So
I mean, he says that, but also at that time when he's talking to Grand Moff Tarkin, that doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, he just says there is a danger, not that, this whole thing's about to erupt, that you could be killed.
Well, he says, do you want your ship standing by? And right. Tarkin's like, evacuate? You want me to evacuate in our moment of triumph?
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
There did seem to be an awareness that this might be dangerous enough to have to evacuate the Grand Moff. At least, on that one level.
Yeah. So the line I was looking at this, several transmissions were beamed to this ship by rebel spies. So if I had written this movie, I would have taken that line. Okay, Princess Leia's ship has got to be someplace else receiving transmissions from rebel spies, not in the middle of a battle, ducking out right in the middle of it. That doesn't work. It didn't work.
Yeah, because that was the thing I was referring to earlier. That continuity of, this spy network beaming.
Okay. Maybe that's what I was thinking of. That all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think that was the connection. Yeah, it doesn't quite fit. It's a bit like trying to put a square peg into a round hole, but it works, and there's enough good things in it that I'm quite happy to watch this film.
I'm on the side of, I understand the criticism. I'm not even trying to push back on too much of it. and there's a lot of wonky plotting, like retro, like you said in the beginning half of this film, where it almost feels like two separate films. You know, you've got this Galen Erso storyline, and there is stirrings of the rebellion. I did like seeing Yavin 4 again, you know, the secret rebel base there. But it's very difficult to go A to Z with the film. Like, I really do have to start it late for the good stuff. And the good stuff is, to me, really, really good stuff. And I can't lie, I love the Darth Vader hallway scene.
Yeah, it's fun.
So Rogue One comes out, and quite honestly, it was pretty successful. It's as far as what it did at the box office, it made a lot of money for a Star Wars, for a spin-off movie. I think it was one of the highest grossing, if not the highest grossing spin-off films ever made at the time. So again, Star Wars is doing well. It's financially feasible. There was a lot of merchandise for Rogue One. You know, it had its own look and aesthetic with the beaches and the seashore, and, you know, the whites of Krennic, and, you know, hot actor at the time. You know, his stock was pretty high. So, you know, Rogue One did well. And I would say this marks the point where this tide starts to pull back here at Lucas.